Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you may be. I want to start off this video by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And the name of this show that I started is called Preservation of Favored Institutions in the Struggle for Belief. And I feel it is important before I get into the topic tonight just to say a few words about what that means. Where did I come up with the idea to do a show with such a title? I think it is a very challenging title, and there is a lot of material that needs to follow. Yeah, there's a lot of material that needs to come behind it in order to paint the picture or to give the idea of what it means. But once you get there, it's understandable. It's not hard to understand. So anyway, I got the title by or from, as some of you would already know, the book The Origin of Species, The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. And what I found is that, and it really hit me one evening as I was just, thinking about this topic for a long time, that the flip side of that thesis is the preservation of favored institutions in the struggle for belief. And what I mean is that the the concept that Darwin established or, promoted and that has influenced the Western world is a set of ideas and beliefs that up to now I don't believe has been proven or hasn't been proven. And I, for one, believe it will never be proven. So, and at the time that it was established and promoted, and there's a serious history of how it was presented to the world and how it began to just change minds and beliefs overnight. So the Christians in that time in that era and that were close to Darwin, there were many people who really objected to what he was doing, and there was a fight. Obviously, as far as institutions are concerned, the scientific community won the battle in Western culture, and they've been winning the battle in the other parts of the world. So the title basically is to say that we have to preserve our institutions because that's what the Darwinians have done. And they've claimed that their institutions are favored. that they are best, that they should be believed, and that other institutions could be exterminated and destroyed. So, because the you remember the notion of Darwinism is that the weak should perish, that creation can't and there's no grounds really for creation to be sympathetic because it's all science. And as they would, they've said, they use words like naturalist, and the naturalist is again one who believes that everything is just based on nature, scientific nature, viewable nature, empirical nature. Um, so, but Darwin, this title is really, it's racist. I'll just come out straight and say that. The preservation of favored races, right? And they were eugenists. His uncle, was it Francis Galton? I want to say it was either, I think it was his uncle or cousin was a eugenist, and there were other people directly connected to Darwin who were eugenists. And it's interesting that Francis Galton, being as prominent and as hardworking as he was to promote evolution and eugenics, that there are preferred races and that, some races are higher up on the creation um, hierarchy, that Darwin is generally excused from doing that. I don't think that he is excused. I think that he was a eugenist himself. At least that's what it looks like from what I've studied or what I understand so far. And I haven't gotten deep into Darwin. I have been reading his letters, which is something like an autobiography. And but so many others have written about him, and so many others took from him and expounded and were eugenists. They believed in eugenics, and they believed in, well, things like concepts that originated or came out of Germany called racial hygiene, fields of study called racial hygiene. And so, but again, so racism then is a belief, and it is a belief that is highly or uh, very solidly. I shouldn't say solidly. Now, in their minds, it's solid that there is a they've established proof that race is something to consider in terms of the hierarchies. And so they want to preserve certain races. Now, again, so looking at it strictly though from a belief perspective, those who aren't racist what do we want to preserve? Those who don't believe that races are better than other races and that certain races should be privileged because of this concept, this scientific racist concept with people like Thomas Henry Huxley, who I think it's Thomas Henry Huxley who they call Darwin's bulldog. And those of us who are not that, so then what are we promoting? And what, you know, how do we figure out our plan and our the steps that we should take in a world is highly materialist, because this all goes back to materialism. I mean, it goes back to what one can see, what one can touch, and what one, can smell. And so that's how these concepts called rationalism, obviously scientific materialism, utilitarianism, humanism, and atheism, among others. These are the main ones. Now, prior to Darwin, because Darwin came out with this book in 1859, those other concepts that I mentioned were already here. And Darwin wasn't the first one to offer up a theory of evolution either. They had been doing this groundwork, because you got these institutions like the Royal Society, which we talk about them one day, at some point in the future, perhaps the Royal Society, and that's where they wanted to, establish a world based on science and without God. But I call the 19th century the century of ideologies. This is when ideologies were able to show themselves. And you could call it the century of isms. So when isms began to, they began to have the ability or the freedom, if you will, to exist. One small example of that is, for instance, in 1818, I think it was 1818 or somewhere around that time, a fella named Percy Shelley, who was a poet, who was a romantic poet, and you have that concept called romanticism. And so we have romanticism as another ism in the 17th century, or excuse me, the 18th century. Okay, so you have German romanticism and you have British romanticism. And when I found out about the about romanticism, it really it it meant a lot to me. I mean, and I'm not saying in a good way. I was quite shocked, and I think that was part of the impetus for me to begin to really consider what really Europeans have been doing. That and the French Revolution. And then, of course, obviously the study of the occult, magic, basically, and Germany's involvement in that, the cultural history of Germany and magic. Italy, prior to them, certain Italians, very important Italians, who were priests or monks as well as magicians. Yeah, actual magicians. So, you know, going down this path, it gave me a different understanding and a more, I think, solid and practical understanding of magic as it applies to the world and world history. So anyway or anyhow, where was I about? So getting back to where we stand as believers, as people on the other side of the isms, we have to understand that what they are doing and what they've been doing is trying to expand, trying to not only preserve but expand completely and to totally eliminate the validity of anything traditional. And so this is when you get, for instance, if you want to look at it this way, you have the history of modernism and postmodernism. So we have traditionalism, which would be obviously religion and family as the main institutions, in government, monarchies, and then we enter into the modern age where, again, the question is put over those institutions. There's a question now. You have significant figures in that process and significant movements. As I mentioned earlier, the French Revolution, where they overturned the monarchy and ushered in this idea that societies didn't have to live by traditional religion. The French did that. Really, the French and what they did in that revolution were the prelude to communism. That, I think, was the first truly open uh, test or display, if you will, of a society rejecting the ancient regime, as they might call it, and the traditional or the classic relationship between God, royalty, and the people. And I think that's where we get the first display or the first example of a right and a left. And so the left obviously being going towards atheism. So Percy Shelley was an atheist. No, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, Percy Shelley was an atheist. He produced a book in Oxford in 1818 or something called On the Necessity of Atheism. Now, I did a paper on Percy Shelley as a requirement for a graduate course called British Romanticism, right? And so he was a British romantic, him along with another fella named Lord Byron. And they were wild. I mean, they did some things, but they were like rap stars or big celebrities back then. And so he was an atheist and he wrote this book and he got kicked out of Oxford for it, right? That tells you something that it was too early for, they weren't going for it yet. But soon after, I don't know how soon, but not long after, they went for it. Probably when you look at Germany, and not probably, but yeah, definitely when you look at Germany and Berlin University or the University of Berlin, I forget which way it's called. I think I saw it the other way. Um, the University of Berlin. I think some call it Humboldt University too. I think the two go together at some point, but generally Berlin University. Between I think 1818 and 1834 or somewhere in there, you had a philosopher named Wilhelm Hegel, and Hegel became the chair of philosophy, Berlin University. And really briefly, I've read a lot about Hegel. I think I have a concept of him. There was a good book that I picked up some time ago, and you have to read these books more than once. And look, I'm going to tell you right now. I'll make this disclaimer, if that's the right word to use. I don't really like doing this study. It's not that I'm some fan of Renaissance or Enlightenment or French Revolution or any of that, you know, or Masonry or Illuminati or none of that. But I found, like the author David Livingston, who wrote a number of books. He's Muslim out of Canada. And he wrote a number of books. The first one that I read of his back in 2010, I think, 2010, 2011, 2010, called Terrorism and the Illuminati. And he said it quite simply is that he believes that someone has to do this work. Someone has to know what we're actually looking at, because you get all this news about this and that and this and that, and obviously that's a lot of fluff and a lot of misleading talk. And then you have researchers and people who will tell you the truth and say a few things that we need to know, and thank goodness, that's good. Many of the books that I've read are written actually by Christians. Couple. One I'm reading right now is called Darwin and Hitler, an excellent book thus far, and a very important piece of work. And he was just as shocked as I was about certain things that I learned about the way they do things and things. It's like it's what's the concept? What's the word? Stranger than fiction. Yeah, this stuff is stranger than fiction. It's like they went to a lot. They went to a lot of work to mislead people. Is all I want to kind of really want to say. I mean, they really, really did a number. Okay, to the point where and that's why it's so hard to kind of come out and talk about it for me, is because first of all, I'm not used to doing videos. Not really. I'm just not. I'm used to talking to live audiences. I need feedback. I need to see a face. I need to get, you know, respond. I need to see a response from people, whether they understand what I'm saying or not. And it helps to guide my conversation. So I'm not really skilled at talking to a microphone. But yeah, so as David Livingston says, they really need that someone has to be able to understand these things that have gone on, all of this, intricate um, misleading that they've done. And really, I think as we know, and it gets a little touchy here, but but the occult, as one doctor said, one gentleman who's passed away named Stanley Monteith. Okay, and you can see some of his videos. His videos are still up, but he said, quite uh, factually, that the reason people don't understand history and they just get confused about things is because they're not looking at it from the right perspective. There's just this huge amount of the events that have occurred and things that have really defined the direction of history that people ignore because they're looking at the sanitized version, as you might say, or the um, what's it called? The basically the mainstream version. Okay, and there's a lot to be said about that because your perception of things, you could be dead wrong about something, and you can think you're right, and there could be millions of people dead wrong about something, and they can think they're right because they've been led to think that, obviously, by those institutions that have dominated them, dominated their identity, dominated their reality. And I would say it's hard to get past that. It is really hard. I think when I look at my situation and I look at really the blessings that I've received in my life, to be aware, to have the mental faculties and the acuity, if you will, the ability to understand or really be able to question what I'm looking at more than many others. And that's just one of the gifts I have. And so I mean, we've all been taught to believe things and do things that just aren't beneficial for us. And it leads back to this concept of the preservation of favored institutions because everything we've done, there's an institution which has called us to it. There are leaders who have called us to it. I mean, even like, for instance, when I heard the concept, I never felt comfortable the first time I heard the term gambling institution. You know, a gambling institution. I mean, before I even began to really read or anything like that, just I was just a regular old guy, just doing what my friends did and stuff like that. To hear the concept or the words gambling institution, it just didn't sit right with me. And what does that mean? That means that these institutions have leadership and callers who believe 100% in what they do and they call to it. And that is what forms their identity. and they have other institutions that they believe in. But again, now we're looking at the conflict that arises between institutions. Clearly, an atheist or an atheistic institution doesn't have anything fundamentally in line with a religious institution. So, how an institution based on secular values, how that institution can form an ongoing, significant relationship with the religious institution, you know, you have to see the value in how that's being played out. So, a simple scenario would be that when a secular banking institution, which they're all secular and they're all based on capitalism and usury, interest, which is a concept that was highly fought against, and it was a sin in the Christian world. David Hoffman wrote a book called Usury in Christendom, the sin that was but no longer is. So you have this institution called banking institution, which collects interest. And when they seek to do business in an environment that has not had an institution that loans money on interest, like in the Muslim world, because I don't think there's anywhere else where the concept has any um, heretical or disbelieving uh, overtones or meaning. It's just like some words in some religious concepts and words are just gone in the Christian world, like heretic. Those aren't gone in the Islamic world. Usury, riba, is not gone in the Muslim world. And so when they say that we're establishing Islamic banking, for instance, you have to have scholars at the table, Islamic scholars, to analyze the structure and the process and basically analyze the institution that is being brought to the community. And there are papers written about it. There's just it's been done a lot. And again, there's so much out there which has been done in refutation to certain things that have been going on in history. So like one of the books I read that again was a good book, similar to what I had said about the book Darwin and Hitler, written by a Christian. And these are, I think they fall under the academic genre of revisionist history. David Hoffman is a revisionist historian. So they go back and they look at history and they say, no, 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 wait a minute. What about this? What about this? What about this? And they basically, I think, make the assumption that, and rightly so, obviously, that too much of history has been written by the victors and the ones who want to obfuscate the situation, keep us sleep, if you will. Let them take care of everything. And so there was another book on Hegel because Hegel had been like, and he's called the seal of the philosophers, by the way. You have to know about Hegel, the Hegelian dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic, and you know, and what he did as to be the seal of the philosophers. Oh my God, you know. But there was a professor at Long Island University who wrote a book. I don't know if the book is 15 years, maybe 20, from college. Is it college or university? Long Island University. And the book was called Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition. Yeah. And that sort of follows the statement, or it parallels the idea that what's his name? Isaac Newton, who was once president of the Royal Society, was called the last magician. Yeah. So here they are promoting the idea of pure science, keep God out of it, but they're magicians. Oh, wow. And so Hegel, all this time, is, according to Glenn McGee, that Hegel was an occultist, that he was a hermeticist, no less. Oh my. The nerve of these people. Yeah, you'll start to see that once I sort of relax and get used to being able to, and hopefully I do, because I want my children to be able to look back and their children to look back, hopefully, and listen to someone like me, just like I listen to people who are gone, and we don't know what they sound like anymore, or my children won't know, but I know. But now, since we have technology, there's so many good things about technology. One of them is being able to record ideas and arguments and things of that nature for progeny, for descendants, for those who are living now, of course, and for descendants. And I want to say something really significant about that in regards to my family, because had if my family would have had internet back in the 30s and the 40s, there probably could have been some tragedies avoided, probably because they would have had a way to stay in touch and know where each other is. But yes, so McGee wrote this book about Hegel and the Hermetic tradition. And he says the reason people don't understand him, and that's the same thing that Stanley Monteith said, the reason people don't understand history, and I mean they don't understand history. They don't understand, for instance, revolution. There's a great book written by a man named um, Billington. Is it James Billington? I should know his name. And the book is called Fire in the Minds of Men: Origins of the Revolutionary Faith. And he was the Librarian of Congress at one point. He is or was a scholar. I want to say he taught at Harvard, but it's James Billington. And so he wrote this book. It's a real thick book, okay? And I studied political science, by the way. So I picked up a BA in political science. And although people may say that's may not make you any money, or it's not necessarily a money degree, although it can be depending on how you might use it, but it's definitely an intellectual degree. The books I had to read and the people that I listened to and so forth, I wouldn't write it off And there's value there in the humanities. There just is, and there always will be. There has to be, because you have to understand the world through literature, various types of literature. And the political literature is right up there at the top in political history. But anyhow, anyway, so what's some of some of the things that I think are very relevant and need to be understood moving forward. And I think I can help paint a picture of it. And of course, being a believer, and when I say believer, I don't just mean a believer in the Creator, Allah, but I also mean a believer in facts. And so it's my job, it's my duty for myself, for my children, and for others to understand what is factual and what isn't. So I go into the idea of critical thinking, and I've been teaching these concepts for many years. Actually, this isn't I didn't just start this. I started talking about institutions. I had this, you know, serious lecture on institutions about around 2012 and 2013. So I've been at this for at least 11 years. And critical thinking, and I'm going to end with this. I teach is a product of your identity, and your identity is a product of the institutions that you adhere to. And therefore, you have to know your institutions, because just because you're a member of an institution doesn't mean you're well versed in it, but you should be, especially if you call yourself a member of that institution, if you're a believer in it. I mean, if it's really what you do and what you say you are. And so the critical thinking is needed almost continuously in this conflict we have of institutions, in the preservation of your institution. And that means you are dealing with a type of onslaught of the other institutions which are trying to expand into your institutional realm. And it's quite literally like war, and in the sense that there's this idea that it's your territory vis-a-vis your other, let's call him, ends in their territory, right? So the border, rather, of your land doesn't end where his begins. It ends in his land. And that is a Darwinian concept, but it's a real concept though, in terms of this institutional battle for the minds and for beliefs that there is no um, utopia or peace, if you will. some type of uh, idealistic peace between the institutional worlds, between the civilizations, if you will. And so they won't be satisfied until they take what they don't have. Okay. And you have to know that because it's the writing is on the wall. When you're a Machiavellian, and we can keep putting out different concepts and different facts and different things which spell out this truth. This is not me talking, these are the facts. When you're a Machiavellian, when you're a neo pagan, okay, when you're a Platonist, someone who bases their identity on the concept of the Republic of Plato, okay, which is very alive and relevant among the ideologues and the elite, obviously, of Western civilization, then you play ball that way and you don't have pity. When you're a Nietzschean, Nietzsche, I'm not surprised when people talk about him that they don't understand that Nietzsche, like Machiavelli, and or even let's say I don't want to say he's worse than Machiavelli. Obviously, he came much later and later in the process when it was more obvious of what their goals. But it's a little surprising. And but then again, like I said, people don't know what they're reading. So they're reading it for enlightenment. Oh my goodness. You need to read it to understand what is the Uberman or the Overman. To me, and it's not just me, but what I've been able to understand from the literature. And again, this is, and I got to end this here. I got to end this here. This is, it's just like your guy, Marquis de Sade, you know, total supervillain, total supervillain, right? So it's either the French or the Germans, and the Germans and the French, right? But more so on Germany. But then you can't say all. French, obviously, they've done what they've done, and I think though that because the Illuminati and all that is German, right? So their influence and the influences of certain figures out of Germany on France helped to kind of or supported what happened in France in 1789. So anyway, this idea of being a supervillain, of devouring the weak. Where's the mercy? Oh no, no, no mercy. And then Islam is constantly telling you be merciful, that Allah is with those who keep the reminder of Him, pray to Him, feed the poor. And these people are saying the opposite. And there have been no counter institutions within their realm. You understand? Meaning they are saying, oh, we're not like that anymore, or that's history. Okay, show me the movement and the institutional structure that would amend that, if you will. They've never amended their values. Those are their values. And I've heard about it. I've it's been said here and there that people sleep with the prince that Machiavelli, the Niccolo Machiavelli's book on their bedside. They go to great lengths to understand Greek and read and learn Greek to read Plato in its original Greek. Okay, and they took Christianity apart anyway, like one intelligent uh, intellectual is what I really want to say. Gentleman who I knew, I haven't spoken to him in many years. A British guy who I really liked. He was the first person that I knew who started to open up my eyes to certain people like Hegel and like Ficino. And he did it so, what can I say? So objectively, I think, and and kindly, I want to say. I did. I almost wanted to say perfunctorily that he did it so easily, just rolled off of his tongue. But as he said, and I don't remember what the reason for him saying it is, but he said, this. That's why we don't have religion in England anymore. And I'm trying to remember. Was it because of the Protestant Revolution? I think it was probably because of the manner or the way in which the Protestants began to take religion apart and allow uh, sharing of values between the non-religious world and the religious world. And Protestants were particularly ready to do that. Anyway, that's all for now. And I'm sorry I didn't get into the family part. I would like to, but I've been going now and I can go. I can go. And I don't even have my notes yet. But it's 52 minutes. So I want to say thank you very much. And I think I got it this time because I did a video the other day and I don't know, 5 minutes of it was the volume went out. And I said, oh, wow. And I did talk about my family. I brought up the documents that I found, about my great grandfather and my great grandmother and the various things that happened that I didn't know about that I found out about through these documents. Oh, wow. And that did a lot for me. It really did. But I want to thank you very much for listening. If you're listening, if you haven't listened, if you've listened to it live or recording, I did send a link to my friends. I know usually, like David Livingston says, your friends are the last ones to. No, no, no. But anyway, I think I can say things in a way that are appealing to someone. I guess in some ways, I'm really eager to be able to create a membership of people who will share their experiences, share their points of views, and allow me to say what I can say to them to hopefully clear up some misunderstandings or give them some insight into the institutional world, which I think is the most important perspective you need to have. You need to be able to stand at the top of the mountain or go as high as you can. And I do go to battle with institutions. And if I'm wrong sometimes, which I am, teachers are wrong sometimes. I mean, even as a teacher, we're wrong. But then I promise you that I'll come back and I'll try and correct it if I find out that I've made some mistake. And it's also a great way to learn. So in 27 years of teaching, especially the last 12 or 13 or 14, I forgot the years before that. I don't remember what I used to do. I learned a lot, and I refined certain skills and ability to handle information. Okay. So, anyway, thank you very much and have a great evening.